deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate, wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy contented least, yet in these thoughts myself almost despising, haply I think on thee, and then my state, like to the lark at break of day arising, from sullen earth sings hymns at heaven's gate. For thy sweet love remembered such wealth brings, that then I scorn to change my state with kings. Well, that is, sometimes sonnets are so good that it's a sin to talk about them. And this is a sonnet which is almost impossible to do. In class at school, I do it pretty much line by line, partly because the students don't have the access that I think many of you do to it. But it's a sonnet that reads itself. We can go over it and pick up a couple of points about how it works, though, and I'd like to. And maybe we can... when in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state. What is the difference between fortune and men's eyes? When in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes.
What people think.
Actually, it would be.
Okay, fortune would be...
Yeah,
what does fortune mean to a Renaissance person? Does anybody know? Who is fortune? Anybody know? Yeah, but it's a character that comes out of a piece called The Consolation of Philosophy by a man named Boethius. And it was the heart and soul of philosophical, theological concepts in terms of imagery in the Middle Ages, and still had a tremendous power in the Renaissance. Fortune is a woman. Did you know that? Dame Fortune, they call her. And she has a wheel. Did you know that?
Yes.
And one of the concepts of the essential structure of life in the Middle Ages is an awareness of this wheel of fortune. It sounds like a television show. Is there a television show called that?
Yes.
Was there? Right. But what does the wheel mean? Do you understand that? What is life?
Ups and downs.
All right, it's ups and downs. The wheel of fortune will always continue, and there will be a time when you're here. But when you're here, what can you know? Yes, yeah. See, if you, it is a way that the Middle Ages prevented itself from falling into despair over the worst times of life, because the wheel must continue. Moreover, what does it do to the person here?
Comes down.
All right, it keeps you balanced, humble, prevents you from realizing that I'm up here for good. It was an extremely attractive concept, both for the person at the bottom and for the person at the top. So anytime you see the word fortune in Renaissance or earlier literature, you should know that it's got an enormous weight of philosophy behind it. What does it mean in this sonnet when he says, when in disgrace with fortune?
You're down at the
All right, when you're down at the bottom. When Dame Fortune says, all right, you're at... Where is the sonnet going to end? Yeah. You see, how does he bring himself? Well, he has access, doesn't he? And it's through the person he loves, who is able to bring himself around. So the sonnet itself begins with the person down here and has an emotional shift of bringing you to the top again by the time it's over. And of course, the tough part here is not that you're miserable, but that men's eyes.
You look down upon.
Everybody knows about it. Right. When you've not only reached the pit, or the nadir, but all the people who look at you say, he's in disgrace. I all alone beweep my outcast state. So many nice things in these little sonnets. What is the point about that second line? Okay, yes. You could drop out all alone, and it would be perfectly syntactical, wouldn't it? When in disgrace with fortune or men's eyes, I weep my out. But the point is, nobody cares, right? I'm the only one weeping, apparently. So he's feeling that sense of, and it's reinforced by outcast. Outcast is a very physical word, isn't it? As though the society had thrown him out. And trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries. Does anybody know the meaning of the old word bootless? Of no avail, right? Without any, we would say vain, wouldn't we? The vain tears, vain cries. Where is heaven?
On top.
It's up there, and heaven is? Yeah, right. So he's trying to trouble deaf heaven, but of course deaf heaven can't hear it, and if it can't hear it, it can't do anything about it. So it's not going to. In terms of position, what do you notice about fortune now that you've got the concept there in heaven? He's at the bottom, but whereas heaven is up here, so that the sense of distance is very great here. It's useless. He's saying, help me. And look upon myself and curse my fate, wishing me like to one more rich in hope. I wish I were, or? Yeah, I wish I
Had
that's a
hope.
song.
You wish you had hope.
He doesn't even say he wishes he were rich, but that he were like that person over there who was in a situation where he could hope for the future. I think we have a touch of despair going on here, don't we? Because the failure to believe in hope or have access to hope is an indication of despair. So he looks to somebody who's got future. Now the medieval philosopher or theologian would say, well, if you're down here, you've got to have hope, right? Because hope is what will bring you. Hope is your knowledge that the wheel will turn. And he's at the point where he's not aware of that. He's only seeing the pit of his emotion. Featured like him. Interesting that he does certain things here. He focuses on an unnamed person, right? And he says, I wish I were in his position in terms of hope. I wish I were featured like him, meaning? Yeah, okay, right. Featured like him with friends possessed. I wish I had his connections. That sets you up against the second line where he is all by himself. Yeah, you see. Desiring this man's art. Now, so the line before that focuses on a particular person apparently, right? But then he expands his jealousy. So that in this line he's saying, oh well, if I couldn't have that, at least I wish I had his genius, that man's scope. I wish I had that man's knowledge, intelligence, breadth, we would say probably. All of these things. With what I most enjoy, contented least. What does that mean? What does that mean? With what I most enjoy, contented least.
Doesn't like what he's got.
Okay, in his normal life when he's happy, what gives him pleasure? Well, whatever it might be. With me it might be book collecting. Right? And it's a situation where what you have traditionally relied on for pleasure, now because you're in a depressed state, nothing. Not only that, it's least of all. So he's totally unsatisfied with his own traits. And students respond to this because adolescents, as some of you who are teachers know, have a tremendous emotional swing. And many of them go through periods where they look themselves in the mirror and they say, what a loathsome creature I am. Right?
And they also look at other people. Everybody else seems, they talk
so much.
like
Absolutely.
their friends.
Yes. Yeah.
We have a daughter that went away to college, and she spent a few days in Portland with her friend Christy. And when my 4-year-old talked to her on the phone, she's over in Pullman, he said, Susu, you sound just like Christy. And it's just because they take on
each other's
pattern.
protective coloring. I think it is. Because they're insecure in
But
themselves.
he, 4 years old, and he figured
I had a student last week in a journal who said, why would any boy want to go out with an ugly girl like me? And she's like, we're just like...
Yeah.
Yes.
Something interesting about going back to that age, I mean, when you remember yourself at that age, and I look at them, and they're all beautiful. I mean, they're...
Yeah.
And you want to say, you want to get in there. But I mean, I remember doing the same thing.
But they lack that openness, and it isn't helped by the high school tradition of the boys only wanting to go out with cheerleaders, right? And the girls only wanting to go out with quarterbacks. Right? Those of you who've taught know that I could pick you 10 of the neatest boys who are going to become men of handsome wit, intelligence. And will the girls look at them? No. You know, they won't take my advice. They're too fascinated with me, I guess. The interesting thing for me about this line, yet in these thoughts, with what I most enjoy, contented least. What's interesting to me about that is that he at this, as the emotion is set forward in the poem, it is possible for fortune to do you down, right? That is, it could be that job, your business might go under, your marriage might sunder. There are all kinds of things that can put you in the bottom. But fortune is not attached to the things that you enjoy most. That is, that's an interior state. So that is, without a wife, without a child, without a job, without success, I could still enjoy sunsets, couldn't I? But he's in the frame of mind where, if you look at that line from one angle, he's saying, well, all right, if that's the way the world's going to treat me, I'm not going to enjoy my book collection either. Right? So you see, it's a sort of love of despair that line seems to imply. And there is a sort of temptation to gnaw at your own innards. So when I'm really down there, I've given up all the external pleasures, and I've given up on the things that I've always enjoyed the most. He says, yet in these thoughts myself, almost despising, haply I think on thee. The key word here is haply. Do you know what that means?
By chance.
Quite by chance, perhaps by accident, while I'm in the pit of despair, despising myself, maybe I think about you, and then you get, remember we called it last fall? The turn, right? And this sonnet, which is moving you into despair, realizes that there is access to something that will bring you back up again. Haply I think on thee, then my state, like to the lark at break of day arising, from sullen earth sings hymns at heaven's gate, is one simile. It's extended for about 2.5 lines. But isn't it wonderful? Right? It always reminds me of Dickens's poem, Split the Lock and you'll find the music. Bulb after bulb in silver rolled. Remember that? In that poem, the image of the bird as just packed with springs of music. If you cut it open, all of a sudden the music comes pouring out. And Shakespeare's picked up that concept. Right? I feel like a lark at break of day coming from sullen earth, an interesting image, to say the dawn is here, with a marvelous image of shift in emotion. Sings hymns at heaven's gate, and you get the couplet, for thy sweet love remembered such wealth brings, that then I scorn to change my state with kings. The last line, I wouldn't change with anybody, and yet the whole purpose of the poem is, I wish I was him, I wish I was her. But when I think of you, they don't have you. So it's a wonderful poem. Yes, definitely. Anybody else have a favorite? Yeah.
143.
143.
It's very different from that.
Oh yeah, I have that one circled too, so I really like seeing if you guys have the same taste as I do. This poem, by the way, you'll want to catch that. It's one of the couple of sonnets that play games with his own name. Did you notice that? Okay, 143. Lo, as a careful housewife runs to catch one of her feathered creatures broke away, sets down her babe, and makes all swift dispatch in pursuit of the thing she would have stay, whilst her neglected child holds her in chase, cries to catch her, whose busy care is bent to follow that which flies before her face, not prizing her poor infant's discontent. So runnest thou after that which flies from thee, whilst I, thy babe, chase thee far behind. But if thou catch thy hope, turn back to me and play the mother's part. Kiss me, be kind. So will I pray that thou mayest have thy will, if thou turn back, and my loud crying still. That's nice.
That imagery is just marvelous.
It's one of his most, what's the word I want to use? One of his clearest sonnets, isn't it? He has one continual image. What does he mean by that in the second line? As a housewife runs to catch one of her feathered creatures broke away. Yeah, sure. The woman has chickens, and when the chicken gets going, the mother drops everything, including the baby, who's left behind screaming for help. For the moment, the chicken is more important. If the mother knows the baby's not in danger, the baby just wants mother. But still, it's an interesting concept of alternative values. Would you believe that the mother values the chicken more than the baby?
At that moment.
But for now, Right? And I never quite decided with this sonnet whether he says it's okay. Right? Maybe this is how the mother is reminded of the baby. See the point? It leaves a little bit up in the air. I'm sure that in the long run he would say, of course, the baby's more important. She sets down her babe and makes all swift dispatch in pursuit of the thing she would have stay, while her neglected child holds her in chase. Pardon?
Chases her.
Yes.
Back to her.
Mm-hmm. He's wanting her. This child is probably 2 or 3 years old, I would think, right? Yeah. Cries to catch her, whose busy care is bent to follow that which flies before her face. We don't need to talk about that. Not prizing her poor infant's discontent. That's the line we might want to say. What does that mean? Not prizing. Okay, what is it? Realizing? Not understanding?
Not aware of it.
Okay. Not recognizing? No.
Not thinking it's important.
Not important.
To prize something. To give. All right, that's it. Not putting at high value this child's discontent for now. Is that right?
Yeah.
Sure, yeah. She doesn't put it at high value. She knows it's crying, but there are times when kids cry and mothers have other things to do. A good mother will go to attend what's immediately important. I think my wife would agree with that. With
The
you.
chicken feeds the child.
Yeah, that's right, ultimately. So runnest you after that which flies from thee. Do you think that he's not talking about chickens? What's he talking about? Okay, yes. Right. What has happened? Remember, we're still in the... we are at this point in the section of the poem where he's dealing with the Dark Lady. It's one of the Dark Lady sonnets. What is the Dark Lady doing? All right, yes. Now, we haven't got into the psychological complexity of these sonnets, but this is a woman who's fickle, isn't she? And right now she's put Shakespeare aside, and she's turning her attention to Ben Jonson or somebody. And his point is that your child, for whom you ought to have much more significant care, is crying for you, and you're going after somebody else. So there's a touch of acidity in here too, isn't there? As you move towards it. If you catch your hope, turn back to me and play the mother's part. Kiss me, be kind. So I will pray that thou mayest have thy will. If you do this, right? Now we're coming across the pun, aren't we?
Yes.
If you do this, I will pray for you that you have your will. In this case, the will be the first level with a small w. What would it be? You can go ahead and have your fling if you want with the other poet, who seems to be in fact, it might be the young man in the earlier part of the sonnets. But it also means, I will pray that you will have, if you come back, you will have your William. Yeah, the capital W. If you turn back, and my loud crying still. What does the still here mean? Quiet, yes, it's a verb. If you turn back and cry and quiet me from my loud crying. That's the way she gets her will, isn't it? Yeah, I suppose he was called Will, because in 3 or 4 sonnets he makes a pun on that, the way John Donne makes a pun on the name Donne. Do you know the pun? Donne's poetry?
And Donne, John Donne.
Yes.
All done.
Yes, you will have done. My students have a hard time with him, believe me. Any other favorites?
71.
71. No longer mourn for me when I am dead. We did this one, I think, last week, didn't we? Did we? It wouldn't do you harm to have it twice. Huh? Does anybody have another one?
How about number 50? That's another one with an animal in it.
Which animal? Let's see. Okay, I don't have this one circled. Let's see what it is. How heavy do I journey on the way, when what I seek, my weary travels end, doth teach that ease and that repose, to say, thus far the miles are measured from thy friend. The beast that bears me, tired with my woe, plods dully on, to bear that weight in me. As if by some instinct the wretch did know his rider loved not speed, being made from thee. The bloody spur cannot provoke him on, that sometimes anger thrusts into his hide, which heavily he answers with a groan. more sharp to me than spurring to his side. For that same groan doth put this in my mind, my grief lies onward, and my joy behind. What? I don't remember that song at all. I read them all over. So it didn't hit me, but reading it out loud, it really is coming along nicely. What's he riding? A horse or a mule. And his circumstance in the sonnet is? He's on the road, moving away. Yes, and the beast itself doesn't want to go, does it?
No.
So he's playing with the phenomenon of him having to go someplace, even using spurs. I have a suspicion that it's a mule, don't you? The resistance to going, as opposed to a horse, is interesting. How heavy do I journey on the way, when what I seek, my weary travels in, doth teach that ease and that repose to say, thus far the miles are measured from thy friend. That's nice, yeah, that's very nice. What does he mean by, what is the end of the journey going to be? He uses the word teach here. What will be the product of his journey in terms of his knowledge? Right. The one thing he will have at the end, no wonder it's a weary journey, is the knowledge that now I am 400 miles from my friend. And so every mile is wearisome and burdensome to him. We don't know why he's going where he's going, do we? All we know is that he has a task to go. The beast that bears me tired with my woe, plods dully on, to bear that weight in me. To bear that weight in me? Okay, the weight, yes.
It's like he weighs more.
Okay, absolutely. I was wondering if you'd catch that. He seems to be saying that I am heavier because of the weight of my heart and leaving my friend. That's nice. As if by some instinct the wretch did know. Who's the wretch here? Yeah, there's more than one wretch, isn't there? Yeah, sure. His rider loved not speed, being made from me. Okay, now that's all right. What does the mule know? Even though the rider is hitting him with his spurs, is not with his heart, and the mule is saying, I know that every mile you leave your friend, the worse you're feeling. The bloody spur cannot provoke him on. What word is shocking there?
Bloody.
Yeah. What does that tell you?
He's been spurring.
A lot. So it must be some strong external need that's putting him on this journey, that he would spur this mule so hard that the blood would be there. But the mule is not going at all. That sometimes anger thrusts into his hide. What kind of anger? Okay, on the one hand, anger with the mule for not going fast enough, but probably,
Because he has the anger.
yes, yeah. I have a student who is, right now this winter, was going through a serious family problem. Very, very unhappy conflict in the family, and she has a horse. She told me that she took her horse and she beat the horse so hard when she was riding it that she lamed it. And I said, I said to her yesterday, well, are you riding your horse? No, it's still lame. I said, how do you feel about that? Awful. But it's exactly this case where her anger at her family was so great that she took it out on the beast and lamed the horse. So it happens. Yeah, I think that's happening here. Which heavily he answers with a groan. Yeah, horses don't groan. Mules groan, don't they? Yeah. More sharp to me than spurring to his side. Why would the groan be sharper to him than the spur in the side of the animal?
He realizes what he's done.
And that means then that he's aware of the depth of his own anger in hurting the mule, but he's also apparently unable to stop doing it. That's psychologically an interesting state. For that same groan doth put this in my mind, my grief lies onward, and my joy behind. So the groan is whose groan? His own groan. I got to make a note about that sound. I like that. Yeah. It's one of the neat things about doing this class. You do things you haven't done millions of times. Any other favorites?
I have another one. It starts out, poor soul, the center.
Poor soul, the center of my sinful earth. I can find that right here. It's 146. Yeah, I have that circled too for work today. So.
I'm certainly learning my Roman
Okay, this is another one of the really great sonnets. And it's in the Dark Lady series, as you know, it's near the end. We're 3 sonnets beyond the one about the housewife. We do not know the opening words of the second line. So you may have variants. Mine will say fooled by. Is that what yours says?
Mine says dots.
Dots. Yeah.
Mine says pressed by.
Pressed by. See, editors have put in the word, this manuscript flaw here. So it's a... I once had this taught to me by a teacher, and it was interesting to hear the lecture on how editors repair what's obviously a great sonnet with their own words. You have fooled by? Yeah, this is the man who put fooled by in there is a man named Malone. We do not know what Shakespeare's original words in that second line. Rebuked by? All right, so we got...
It's peasant.
It's fooled by these rebel powers. We have it? Okay. Poor soul. Pardon me?
What year do you thought that would have been changed?
19th century probably. That was a century that went into this kind of editing. But it's still open for conjecture. We do not know what it would be. It's too bad because it's such marvelous
Because
something.
with my sinful
Oh, that.
It doesn't say poor soul. Check. You might have the wrong one.
146?
Yeah, 146. Does it? Oh, I've never seen it without the poor soul.
It begins my sinful earth. The
Yeah.
second line, these rebel powers. You want to see it?
Yeah. What's poor soul? The center. Oh, my sinful earth, these rebel powers. That's right. I thought you were talking about the first line. Yeah, the quarto has my sinful earth repeated. That is strictly accurate. But editors have felt that was a printing error, so that they don't know. Poor soul, the center of my sinful earth, fooled by these rebel powers that thee array, why dost thou pine within, and suffer dearth, painting thy outward walls so costly gay? Why so large cost, having so short a lease, dost thou upon thy fading mansion spend? Shall worms, inheritors of this excess, eat up thy charge? Is this thy body's end? Then, soul, live thou upon thy servant's loss, and let that pine to aggravate thy store. Buy terms divine in selling hours of dross. Within be fed, without be rich no more. So shalt thou feed on death that feeds on men, and death once dead, there's no more dying then. As a reminder of death being not proud, isn't it? You can hear the echo. Of course, there's a possibility that the two men knew each other, or came close to it, because Donne was writing shortly after Shakespeare. He would have been a young man at the time. This one we probably should take a closer look at, though. Huh? Poor soul, the center of my sinful earth, fooled by these rebel powers that thee array. What does he mean by rebel powers here? You can figure that out.
That is flesh.
Okay, it's the soul is at the heart, but our bodies have their ways, don't they? And that array means to dress up or to clad something or decorate something, isn't it? And so we say you've been fooled in a sense by the physical. We've allowed the physical to take prominence that it ought not have. The soul is, after all, for Shakespeare, he says, the center. And what you do is protect your soul and let the body go about its own way, because time will take care of the body, and the soul is what is permanent. But we, as we're adults, especially when we're young and handsome or beautiful, we find that we put a lot more value on the rebel powers, which are claiming domination when the soul should dominate, because we're young and beautiful. And Shakespeare says the physical is not going to be what's lasting. You have to give that up. Why do you pine within and suffer dearth, painting thy outward walls so costly gay? What's happening to the soul? Right?
It's starving.
Pine means to starve away. Right? So what you're doing is letting your interior weaken through starvation, loss of sustenance, And what do you put your attention on instead?
How you
So
appear to others.
Yes, your outward. Paint yourself up, make yourself look good every morning. Right. New clothes, right? Hairstyle, new hair dye, right? Not dye. What do you call it? Tint. Yes, a tint. Why so large cost, having so short a lease, dost thou upon thy fading mansion spend? That's nice. What's the imagery here? Your body is a mansion, but what kind of mansion? So what do you do when the house is falling down around you?
Dress it
All
up.
right, that's what I do. I slap a coat of paint on it. You keep on slapping coats of paint until you move out, don't you? And that's what he's saying. Why are you wasting all that money on a house which is only rented, leased? It's just a leased house. So yes, and it's falling apart. Shall worms, inheritors of this excess, eat up thy charge? What's the answer to that question? Rhetorical question. Yeah. So what you're doing is decorating something that's going to go not to your children, but to dust. Dust, yes. Is this thy body's end? And that's merely a reinforcement, isn't it? Right? Your body is going to go to this spot. Then, soul, live thou upon thy servant's loss, and let that pine to aggravate thy store. What does that mean? Live thou upon thy servant's loss. What is it? Who is the servant and who is the master here?
Does he mean like giving up the things of the world?
No, I don't think so. No, I think the servant is the body, and the body is of necessity going to decay, become weaker, deteriorate. You can think of it. How can the soul live upon the decaying or weakening of the body? What would it be? He says, and if you do that, and let it pine. In other words, let it starve to increase your store here being what you feast upon, right? Your storage, your cache of energy, and whatever language you want to use. How could that work? How could it be that the body could be turned into a feeding house, essentially, for the soul? Let that pine to aggravate thy store. By terms divine, in selling hours of dross. Dross is garbage, what's left over, right? The unnecessary. Essentially, he's saying you can sell the unnecessary of your physical body and buy, right, something divine as a consequence. I have a tendency with this sonnet to want to read it as almost in a Christian sense. That is, what you can do, soul, if you are willing to look at life properly, is get a proper attitude by being aware of the necessary evolution of time. And that your soul can be enhanced, can be more ready for salvation, if you realize that all creatures are on the wheel, and a natural extension of time is dying, aging, decay, and that the result of that is to prepare yourself for death and for heaven. And then you can use the loss of your physical strength to strengthen your soul in that very time. Instead of frantically throwing layers of paint over the decaying mansion, you use that instead as a means of buying.
It's like
divinity.
people who've had disabilities or something, they actually become stronger internally
that's
than
right.
a person who's had everything.
That's right. You use it. Use what you have. My grandma's phrase is making lemonade out of your lemons. Nothing is going to turn you into 20 again, any of us into 20 again, but we can take advantage of what we have. I like this. Not many of Shakespeare's sonnets come in with this angle, do they? Have you noticed that? But it's a nice one.
To die elements that kind of disturbs me.
But I don't think it's it. I think it's not waiting, it's working. It's keeping. I know what you mean, though.
And I prefer the paint on the old mansion to the old mansion decaying too.
But what would he say?
It didn't hurt the soul of the old house to get a coat of paint.
No, but what would he say in terms of the decay? Is the coat of paint going to stop the decay?
Cover it up.
I think he would say it just covers it up.
I don't think,
You don't think so?
I know, paint's a preservative. Maybe not on a face, but on a house.
I know I have some rot in I have some rot in the deck behind, and I covered up with paint, and those boards still need to be.
But that's because the paint wasn't there fast enough.
So now we're talking about aerobics, are we? Yeah, okay.
You were busy.
When you were talking about the Christian sense, couldn't the whole thing be in that medieval Christian tradition of the humiliation of the body?
Humiliation of the body. Yeah.
He was a good Christian. I wonder if anybody else has the experience that he had in his church, where he's buried on the left side of the altar, has never been moved. As you say, the lady who took us through said the reason he was buried there at the time of his death was because he tithed so well.
So you got a good spot.
So he had a good spot, and he was a good practicing Christian, apparently.
Or else he was covering his bed. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, you're jaded.
I wondered if she were right, or if anybody else that went through there had the experience.
I think
That was rather interesting.
people who had the money didn't take any chances. You know, there was not a lot of disbelief in an absolute sense in the Renaissance. Even the more advanced believers wouldn't want to risk anything. That's interesting, yeah. I don't know about... I tend to see the sonnet as more addressed towards how you preserve and protect your soul than how you humiliate the body. I don't see it as a... I certainly don't see it as a medieval Catholic example of flagellation, that type of thing. No, but I think he is saying what happens as we age is that we have to keep things in perspective, and that we have a temptation to elevate and decorate the exterior, and what you need to do is you have to neglect the interior. The opening line is a clue for me. Poor soul. Right? Most of us don't put our money on the right part, essentially.
The whited sepulchre full of dead man's bones. Would it be the same sort
Yeah,
of thing?
yeah. Not that far, because it's a very personal poem. He's talking to himself, essentially. You know, I have neglected you, and we all do. What the heck? I think we all do that. Yeah, yeah.
I don't get by
11. By terms divine in selling hours of dross. A term is an extended length of time. And what he's saying is that what you do is sell, how much time are you going to have on earth? Right? If you're reaching the age that your body is decaying, and he seems to feel this in this poem, what he's doing is wasting time fixing up an habitation. He's only got a few months left on his lease. You can sell that lease essentially as excess baggage. Withdrawals is what's excess. You don't need it anymore. And by doing that, you can purchase divinity, right? Terms, semesters, right? Semesters of divinity by planning now. But God won't wait till you, right? If you try to sneak in underneath the deadline, it's too late, right? Nobody can plan ahead to say confession on your deathbed, because the very thought of planning ahead invalidates your confession, doesn't it? I mean, in traditional terms. So that I think he's saying now is the time to think of what you're getting, and you have to sell something. You have to give up something, and what you give up is essentially dross in the long run. A lot of people thought they could go with the body until the very last minute. He's saying no, you must give up some of this and realize that it really is excess.
When he refers, I think you mentioned it, but I just want to clarify it. When you, in 2 lines about it, then soul, live thou upon thy servant's love, the servant being the body.
Yes, that's right.
Or all exterior worldly.
I think he's sticking with the body.
Okay.
I think he is. That is, the body is a servant of the soul traditionally, but the soul has become the poverty-stricken one serving the body. And he's saying what you have to do is take something away from the body, and the body will lose. Reverse it, yes.
He uses fine again.
Sure, that's right. He repeats the word. The body has to starve for the sake of the soul here, essentially, it seems to me, is what he's saying. And the word servant reminds you of the proper relationship. I mean, things have not been right. The servant is to serve the master, is it not? But your servant hasn't been doing that. You've been doing this, and that's why you're poverty-stricken. There's a great line in Chaucer's prologue about, I think it's a Franklin, who is so good a servant to his master that he sells the master his own horses and his own clothes and then gets a tip as well. Right? There's a sense of things being totally reversed in the sonnet, and now it's time to bring it back, make it work. Within be fed, without be rich, no more. You see, stop that painting. Yeah. So shalt thou feed on death that feeds on men. And death once dead, there's no more dying. Well, there certainly is a religious poem, isn't it?
That sounds Christian.
Yes, very much so. How does he mean you will feed on death? How can the soul feed on death this way? Well, isn't it in terms of attitude? That is, what aging does for you is remind you that death is present in the world. My students don't think that death is present. If you're 17, you think you're going to live forever. But Shakespeare is addressing this to people who have gone up to the point where they know they've lost people. Their own strength is weakening, ebbing. And he says that can give you the impetus to come to terms with that reality, and therefore prepare yourself for death in a way which will invalidate death. So this sonnet is touching the metaphysical poetry, by the way.
Doesn't that mean to concentrate on your immortal soul and stop
therefore void
messing
it.
up your body?
That's right, void it,
Yeah,
essentially.
forget the body.
Because the body's going to die anyway. But if you can transcend that and move into the eternal, then you've solved the problem.
Then there is no death.
That's right. You can see it. I think John Donne would love this poem.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It's very metaphysical. It's a highly sophisticated poem. The intellectual concepts are.
Then thou shalt die, poor death.
Yes.
And that's the same
That's
thing.
right.
And death once dead, there's no more
That's
dying
right.
then.
That's right. I think maybe Donne knew that sonnet before he wrote his own. This came first, so give him credit. Yes.
Well, I was just wondering if any relationship or repair of the body, while the body's being repaired, also repair your soul.
Well, he doesn't want you to repair the body anymore.
No way.
No, I think he's saying, let it go. Let it go. All of the references to the body here are slighting. It's cosmetics.
Isn't that like Yeats of One More Tatter in My Mortal Dress?
Oh, it could
Yeah.
be. Yeah. I think I saw the old men.
Old Age by the Tail,
Yeah, saw the old men. Okay, well, it's time to stop then. We're at a good point, and we'll come back and look at a few of these others in about 5 minutes. Very well, if you want, we'll just continue with the sequence we're doing. You can continue volunteering, and anybody have another favorite that we haven't touched on?
Let's have the Dark Lady.
You want to do some of the Dark Lady ones? Okay, the Dark Lady sonnets run from 127 to 152. What I did was pick out, we've already been doing, we've done 2 Dark Lady sonnets already in this sequence. The reason I wanted to address them today at the end is that when you make the shift from the other sonnets, where he's going through a series of emotions, obviously, attitudes, they're addressed to a male who he's admiring in a very conventional way. You do feel that there's a lot of reality underneath these. His sonnets are so much more powerful. But there's no doubt that for psychological complexity, it's when he moves towards the heterosexual element that these poems really acquire a kind of perverse fascination. They are much more difficult to teach to young people because some of them are really, especially in a church school environment, I mean, they raise issues of very serious adult issues. And I do want to look at a couple of them anyway, because I think you'll catch the darkness of the relationships between men and women. Why we do things we loathe ourselves for doing. And adolescents don't have a deep sense of that, but almost all of us who've lived more than a few years find that life is a lot more complex than we once thought. And the reason I find these sonnets interesting is that I think they touch very closely to the reality of human relationships. We are confused.
Who calls, where's the Dark Lady?
It's a simple term. All Dark Lady means is that the woman he's addressing is a brunette.
Oh.
All right. Shakespeare always did things his own way, and the convention in Renaissance was always that the woman you were praising and loving was a blonde. Fairness was the criterion for beauty, and this is true no matter who you're praising. If you're John Donne or Spencer and you're writing sonnets about the woman you love who is your own wife, for the sake of poetry, she's got to be blonde, got to be fair-skinned. Okay, because that is the standard for beauty. And you know this from your own childhood, I'm sure, that your mother or grandmother must have told you how in the 19th century a woman would have died before letting the sun touch her skin. Because a tan or a darkening of the skin was an immediate sign of a low-class, outside worker. So ladies worked for the fairest possible skin and the fairest possible hair. Shakespeare turns that around entirely. He says, the woman I love is a dark lady. She's got dark brown hair. It doesn't mean dark in the sense that she's evil, right? And it doesn't. And it's not that she's black. It's just that she's dark complected, dark haired. Shakespeare always did things his own way, and so these have always been called, because of that, the Dark Lady Sonnets. They're the only sonnets from this period that deal with a brunette or brown-haired woman. Okay, let's look at a couple of these. Turn to Sonnet 129, which is one of the touchiest sonnets of all of them, and a tough one because it deals with a lust, especially the male phenomenon, I guess you'd call it, though I don't know why it couldn't be female as well, of giving in to a lustful state when you know you ought not to do it. The woman that this sonnet's addressed is a woman who is irresistible to Shakespeare, but she should be resisted. He has no business being with this person, but he can't stay away from her. And so the sonnets are filled with a complexity of emotion.
Show that your intellect is totally separate from your emotions.
That's right.
I mean, you can know what
That's right.
you should do.
And we can all find a parallel to that. If it's not a bottle of something, or a horse, or a car, right, or a trip to Ashland when you can't afford it. You know? Whatever it is, there are things that yes, but the most powerful one is sex, obviously, because it's the one that has damned so many people. The expense of spirit and a waste of shame is lust in action. And till action, lust is perjured, murderous, bloody, full of blame. Savage, extreme, rude, cruel, not to trust. Enjoyed no sooner, but despised straight. Past reason hunted, and no sooner had past reason hated as a swallowed bait, on purpose laid to make the taker mad. Mad in pursuit. It's a classic statement, and the part of it that's so very. There are two parts, I think, for me, that are really shocking, difficult to talk about. The one is the pursuit, lust in action. Well, do anything, right? I mean, we have the cliche. We all have it. There's no right. All's fair in love and war. And when you're after a woman, it doesn't make any difference if she's married, if she's got children, if she wants you or doesn't want you. The tradition of mankind to get what it desires. But that's linked to this horrible paradox, and the Renaissance loved the paradox. The paradox is the possession of this person is ashes and all, isn't it? You can't read this sonnet without thinking of Keats's Ode to a Grecian Urn, where he says the happy, happy, happy pair, right? The only permanent happiness you can imagine is the happiness of those young people on the urn where he is reaching out to her and this far from grabbing her, always on the verge of getting the woman, but never having to suffer the reality of actually getting her. That is permanent happiness. But in the real world, that doesn't happen. We are not frozen in art, in beauty, on a Grecian urn. Instead, we're here with Shakespeare, where we're driving after, catching, and hating, and loathing. We can all think of the cliches. Will you love me in the morning? You know? The answer is probably going to be no. Right? I won't, and I won't respect you. But it also reminds me of Groucho Marx. Right? I wouldn't belong to a club that would have me as a member. So if you want me, then there's something wrong with you. What's shocking about it is that you won't come across many sonnets as violent in their imagery as this, in their words. You notice it's not a beautiful sonnet at all. It's a harsh, assaultive sonnet with sequences of single words that hit you like a hammer. All of these traits being traits of so he's clearly loathing himself. And yet, right? And yet, like my friend who can't stay away from the poker table, and probably will end up the broken marriage. I mean, his wife has said, "You don't stop, I'm through." And I saw him last week, and he said, "Last weekend, and I said, does your wife know?" "No, but she's going to find out." You know, and he cannot not go to the poker game table, and he hates himself because of it.
Or women that are compulsive spenders.
Yes, you know, Nordstrom's is just as bad. It's just as bad. Let's look at some of the action. The expense of spirit in a waste of shame is lust in action. I remember when I first read the sonnet, that line didn't mean anything to me, but I think I understand it. When you achieve, notice he's not talking about love. Notice that. We're talking about lust. That is, the act of love as a lustful act is a loss of spirit, a waste of spirit. It's pouring out your interior, right? Your soul, essentially, in a waste of shame. Because lust without love is a shame, isn't it? It's a degradation. So he's saying that when you commit yourself to that part of your body, what you're doing is losing your very essence, the essence of yourself, your spirit. But that's not the point. You know, it ends there with the semicolon. Until action, right? So therefore, when you get the state you desire, you're throwing your soul away in shame. But until you get to that point, it's just as bad. So lust there's no good to it at all. What is it? Until you get the action, which is actually getting that woman to bed with you, lust is perjured. Will you lie? Yes. Murderous, bloody, full of blame, savage, extreme, cruel. We don't have to elucidate these terms. They still have the same meaning. The point being that you will do anything to get that woman you're after. Not to trust. I've always thought about. That seems so mild, right? Compared to all these other. He leads you up, but in fact, a woman who trusts a man who's like that is just as much damned, isn't she, as he is. And the problem is you give in to this person who is so intent. Enjoyed no sooner, but despised straight. That's clear, isn't it? Right? The minute he's got you, he despises you. Past reason hunted. What does that mean? Past reason hunted.
Mad.
Right. You could not intellectualize why. Right? Nobody knows why a person under this influence is searching the person he's after. It's not reason. But what does the word hunt tell you? What's it like? No, it's hunted. Yeah, you have a typo there, I think. No, it's past reason hunted. First one.
Oh, I was
Okay.
looking at the
Yeah.
next line, sorry.
But hunted. What does it take with it? Okay, take what kind of chase? In England, what kind of chase would it be? Probably. The dogs after the fox, right? Sure. The doe or the deer, the roebuck springing through. A sense of franticness, I think. A hunt is not in this to be the way you would imagine your husband or your father is sitting behind a deer break, waiting for a deer to swim. This is movement. This is action. Very cruel. Yes, that's right. And no sooner had past reason hated as a swallowed bait. Right? When you get it, what's it like? Yeah, I like it. The idea of it being in the throat. You know, right? You get it, and it's like something like a hook in the throat. My son caught a trout yesterday at Green Lake. He's been going down daily, and next to all these people who are pulling in fish after fish, he come home just distraught. So I came home from work yesterday. Well, I went fishing today, Dad. So, yeah. Didn't get anything either. Oh, that's too bad. Maybe someday, you know. Oh, I didn't get anything at all. He's 11, you know. So then he dragged me out of the kitchen, and here's this paradise, you know, paradise. So today, this morning at 6 o'clock, I'm going fishing today after school. Yeah. Past reason hated as a swallowed bait on purpose laid to make the taker mad. Now that expands it. What does that mean on purpose?
It means that he was almost trapped into this lust by somebody baiting
That's right.
him, a teaser type person.
That's right. Or it could be he was doing it to himself, isn't it? Like both ways, yes. But it's a bait to trap you. The way they would lay bait for birds in England, right, to get them. But this is a bait which, when you eat it, what happens to you? You go crazy. It's insanity, sure, and that's why you hate it. Mad in pursuit and in possession. So, what does the soul here mean? Okay, as well. You're crazy when you're hunting, and you're crazy when you get. Yes. Had, having, and in quest to have, extreme. Everything is extreme. A bliss in proof, and proved a very woe. What does that mean then? A bliss in proof.
As long as you're looking for it, it seems blissful. But
And-
once you get it,
Okay. But and even the act itself, is that a kind of bliss?
that's
A
it.
proof? But once you've, then it's
Whoa.
woe. Before a joy proposed, behind a dream. So, right, it's all, it has the insubstantiality of a dream once you've got it. And then, of course, in this case, the couplet comes on strongly. All this the world well knows. Is it true?
Yeah.
This is not news to anybody, right? Yet none knows well to shun the heaven that leads men to this hell. Does he mean women as well as men, or is he speaking about men here?
Last night on television they showed Amerasian children who'd been left by American servicemen, and it showed this one Vietnamese woman who's raised a black Vietnamese child for about 14 years. And they said, what would you do if you could talk to this man? And I guess he had been contacted, but he didn't want anything to do with it. And the little girl was kind of in tears, and the mother said, I would just tell my husband, she considered him a husband, how hard it's been for me as a woman to bring up this child, you know, how hellish her life had been. And of course, and they said that a lot of the American servicemen felt like they had been put over there. It was a hellish war, and it was almost like they didn't care, you know,
Yeah.
they really
That's right.
had contempt, not really contempt, but
Their pleasure is a
Yeah.
Well, if she was thinking of love, he wasn't, was he?
and the
Obviously.
women were, but they felt that they had their whole life
Madam
secure.
Butterfly.
Same story.
I think of, when I read this, I think of the opening scene in King Lear, when Gloucester's coming on stage with Edmund, and he's with a buddy, and he says, hey, look at this guy here. Boy, he was sure fun. I had a good night with his mom the night he was bred. And Edmund, who's going to be one of these tremendous villains, is standing there listening to his father talking about the fruit of his lust as though he were not even there. And you ask students, well, how would you feel if you were raised by a man? I mean, Gloucester did his duty, right? I mean, he educated the boy, raised him, he was handsome. But then you get these guys, base, bastard, bastardy. Why base, right, when I am as well compacted as any honest madam's issue, remember? Well, Gloucester got his comeuppance, or the consequence of his lust. Yeah, I don't think that even is played right on stage most of the time. I think you have to see this as the first of the indications of the failure to see the consequences of actions. Yeah. To shun the heaven. Did we read 130 two weeks ago? My mistress' eyes are nothing like the sun. Yeah. Choral is far more red. What a contrast in tone. Have you noticed that? This is strictly amusing. But it comes around to I love her more than you'd expect. You see, coral is far more red than her lips red. If snow be white, why, then her breasts are dun. If hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head. Okay, see, she's got dark hair, you can see. I have seen roses damasked, white and red and white, but no such roses see I in her cheeks. Now he's strictly paying humorous reference to the other sonnets, in which the sonneteers would all say, my mistress's hair is beautiful white, and her skin is white with little red. And he says, I don't see any of that on this woman. And in some perfumes is there more delight than in the breath that from my mistress reeks. I love to hear, I read that in class once, and somebody raised her hand and said, did you know that Clark Gable had horrible breath? And that women, the co-stars, just hated being in a love scene with him because I love to hear her speak. Yet well I know that music hath a far more pleasing sound. I grant I never saw a goddess go. My mistress, when she walks, treads on the ground. And yet, by heaven, I think my love as rare as any she, belied, false compare. What is he essentially accusing other poets of doing then?
Lying.
Yes, I will be the realist. But I love her as much as any of you liars do, who go around saying your mistress is this perfect, yes. I want a mistress who walks on the ground.
I wonder how the mistress like that would know.
I don't think this woman was very soft-hearted person, and I don't think she liked the sonnet, if you go read many of these. Okay, turn over 135 for a minute or two, just to remind us of his loving attention to his own name and his love of puns. This is not a particularly good sonnet, but it's fun to read because of all the wills in it. You see the will?
Yeah.
Whoever hath her wish, thou hast thy will, and will to boot, and will in overplus. More than enough am I, that vex thee still, to thy sweet will making addition thus. Wilt thou, whose will is large and spacious, not once vouchsafe to hide my will in thine? Shall will in others seem right gracious, and in my will no fair acceptance shine? The sea, all water, yet receives rain still, and in abundance addeth to his store. And so thou, being rich in will, add to thy will one will of mine to make thy large will more. Let no unkind, no fair beseechers kill. Let all think all but one, and me in that one will. He doesn't do much with that except make something amusing. Obviously, he's over. Don't you think he's overgone? Yeah. So he played with that. But look at 136, and here's another one that plays on his name and does it more successfully. If thy soul check thee, that I come so near, swear to thy blind soul that I was thy will. And will, thy soul knows, is admitted there. Thus far, for love my love suit sweet fulfill. Will fulfill the treasure of thy love. Aye, fill it full of wills, and my will one. In things of great receipt with ease we prove, among a number one is reckoned none. Then in the number let me pass untold, though in thy store's account I one must be. For nothing hold me, so it please thee hold, that nothing me, a something sweet to thee. Make but my name thy love, and love that still, and then thou lovest me, for my name is Will. That works a little bit better. Okay. Turn to 138, a sonnet that we want to look a little more closely at. It also involves a pun, and it's got a touch of raciness to it. When my love swears that she is made of truth, I do believe her, though I know she lies. That she might think me some untutored youth, unlearned in the world's false subtleties, thus vainly thinking that she thinks me young, although she knows my days are past the best. Simply I credit her false-speaking tongue. On both sides thus is simple truth suppressed. But wherefore says she not she is unjust? And wherefore say not I that I am old? Oh, love's best habit is in seeming trust, and age in love loves not to have years told. Therefore I lie with her, and she with me, and in our faults by lies we flattered me. I do like that one. I think that's what's happening? How do they each lie to each other in one way or another?
Refusing to grow.
Okay, they don't want to think about age, right? When my love swears that she is made of truth, I do believe her, though I know she lies. Right? She swears to him, truth, I love you forever, right? You're the only man. And of course, we know the dark lady, right? She's going around with all kinds of people. But he says, I'm fascinated by the willed decision to be deceived. Right? He's able to say in the sonnet, I know this woman is not. But the way we make our relationship continue and work is to choose certain beliefs and not to think about them otherwise. And he says, moreover, it goes in both directions. Right? So there's a certain balance here. It's not as though he's a deceived husband. Right? You know, the typical Ann Landers situation, don't tell the husband, that the wife, she probably doesn't want to know. You know the situation I'm talking about? There's much more balance than you see in the newspapers. That she might think me some untutored youth, unlearned in the world's false subtleties. Why does he believe her? So that she can believe, or choose to believe, that Shakespeare is innocent or naive enough to believe her lies. The assumption apparently being that if she saw him as a sophisticated man who understands the ways of the world, she wouldn't want him, that she is attracted to his naivete. And so he creates a naive, believing posture for the sake of that. Curious. Thus vainly thinking that she thinks me young. On the other hand, she doesn't really believe that he's that. So just as he doesn't believe that she's that true, she doesn't believe that he's that innocent. But it makes him feel good to think that she thinks that he's not quite as old and falling apart as he probably is. Although she knows my days are past the best. So he's obviously over 18. Simply, I credit her false speaking tongue. What does that mean, simply, here? I credit her. I give belief, okay, okay, without getting into the complexities of the issue. I give it simple credit. Credit's an interesting word here. It's a banking term too. You give credit to somebody you trust, but occasionally bankers give credit to people they don't trust. Right? Yeah, Seafirst in Oklahoma or something like that. So he gives that to her. On both sides, thus, is simple truth suppressed. And then he says, why does she say that she is unjust? In other words, why doesn't she admit the truth of her nature, right? And why do I not say that I am old? Well, why don't I admit that I'm over the hill? And then you get these curious last lines. Oh, love's best habit is in seeming trust. And age and love loves not to have years told. There are the two parts. The first part is love's best habit is in seeming trust, meaning what? Okay, yes, okay, you make believe, regardless of reality, you make believe that you trust your loved one. And also, of course, you also pretend that you're young and handsome, right? So that two willed falsities going on here. And then you get his humorous conclusion. Therefore, I lie with her, yes, and she with me, and that's a pun, obviously. And in our faults, by lies, we flattered thee. What does it mean at the end then? In our faults, how do we feel? Good. Yes, we feel it's like being on stage. Yeah. Yes. We did 143. Turn to 144. This is an interesting one too. Two loves I have, of comfort and despair, which like two spirits do suggest me still. The better angel is a man right fair, the worser spirit a woman colored ill. To win me soon to hell, my female evil tempted my better angel from my side, and would corrupt my saint to be a devil, wooing his purity with her foul pride. And whether that my angel be turned fiend, suspect I may, yet not directly tell. But being both from me, both to each friend, I guess one angel in another's hell. Yet this shall I ne'er know, but live in doubt, to my bad angel, fire my good one out. Interesting. What's he talking about here? Who are the two angels, the good and the bad? Well, he's talking about two different people here. This is that fickle side of the woman, and the susceptible side of the man, who's his friend. So this is one of those curious situations where he's talking about his best friend and the woman he loves. And she has turned her attention from him. She is the evil one. He's well aware that she's a dangerous woman. And instead she's putting all her wiles on this good angel, the friend, who probably is the young man in the first 127 sonnets. The problem, of course, is that what's his position? What's his position? How can he know what's going on? How can he know? He can't know, can he? All he can see is the outside. So what he does not know as a lover or a friend is how far this relationship, which is pretty clear on the outside, has actually gone. My footnote says here that the last lines I'll never know, but live in doubt until my bad angel fire my good one out, means infect with venereal disease. And that's the only way you get literal, absolute proof. Because, of course, people can deny and deny and not deny, can't they? And so he'll never know for sure until... But it also implies that she could do it. That he knows that, right, if she has a disease of some kind, it's just an indication of her previous lives. This is a woman who's not to be trusted. In spite of his will in the other sonnet to trust her, right? To believe that she's faithful. Let's take a look at a couple of these. Two loves I have, of comfort and despair. What is the comfort? Okay, well, here it would be, which part? The man, right? The man is friendship, comfort. Why would he say, I have a love of despair? Yeah.
He's driven to her.
He's driven to her, yes. And he's recognizing that he's enamored, totally enamored of this. And he's not telling lies to us, is he? It's like in the other sonnet, they lie to each other, but he's saying, I know that this is a woman for whom I am absolutely enraptured in despair. And there's no possible happy consequence of this. Which like two spirits do suggest me still. The better angel, which remind me of two contending spirits, is what he's saying. Which I am, what they suggest to me that they are contending spirits. You have that? A good angel and a bad angel. The better angel is a man, right? Fair. What do you know about him?
He's fair.
Meaning he's blonde. Yes, a fair-haired, fair-skinned man. The worser spirit is a woman colored ill. That means that she's dark, brunette. To win me soon to hell, my female evil tempteth my better angel from my side. What's the motive? Why is she
And still jealous.
to win him to hell through jealousy and despair, isn't she? So is she after the good friend for reasons of love?
No.
Oh no, she's out to destroy him. So he sees himself as the centerpiece of this, doesn't he? Going after your best friend just to see how you react. I see little vignettes of this in high school all the time. It's common in high school for a girlfriend to go after her best friend's boyfriend, right? And not want him. But they're playing little adult... Yeah, sure it is. They're playing little adult games in a very simple way, which when you grow up become tragedy, don't they? In the real world. So it's not uncommon. And would corrupt my saint to be a devil, wooing his purity with her foul pride. But whether my angel be turned fiend, I may suspect it, but I can't tell for sure, because both are away from me, being both from me, both to each friend, meaning that they are together and separately friends with each other. I guess one angel in another's hell, meaning that I can't tell for sure. But I will never know and live in doubt unless she gives my best friend some horrible physical disease. You don't like that? It's a sad poem.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Awfully frank in one reason.
Yes, but that's Renaissance too. This is by no means the frankest of the kind of poem that you'd appear. We did Poor Soul. Let's pass over that. I'm going to read this to you without going through it because it's probably his most risque poem, and maybe the most risque thing he ever did.
Which one is this?
151. It's I think it's a highly amusing sonnet, but it's a sonnet I could never read to my students, and I would not even probably do in high school, but I think we're all over the age of 21 here, so we could probably take it. And it does remind you of the Renaissance openness in this physical area, as you can see. Love is too young to know what conscience is, yet who knows not conscience is born of love. Then, gentle cheater, urge not my amiss, lest guilty of my faults thy sweet self prove. For thou, betraying me, I do betray my nobler part to my gross body's treason. There's the soul, by the way, in the sinful earth. You see that? Because I love you, I betray my nobler part. My soul doth tell my body that he may triumph in love. Flesh stays no farther reason, right? As soon as your soul lets itself go, your body says, all right, I don't need any more excuse. I'm free. But rising at thy name doth point out thee as his triumphant prize. Proud of this pride, He is contented thy poor drudge to be, to stand in thy affairs, fall by thy side. No want of conscience hold it that I call her love, for whose dear love I rise and fall. You know, really interesting sonnet. Seldom done in public. Those are some examples of the Dark Lady sonnets and the complexity of emotion, which are really interesting. I urge you maybe to sit down and read some of the others. There are 10 or 15 others that we haven't looked at.
Do what they call the turn in these sonnets come the same line?
They usually come.
In the couplet,
No. The turn is almost always specifically attached to the sestet in the Elizabethan. Here you'll usually see it coming after the second quatrain, sometimes after the third quatrain. So you have to kind of listen for
marked
it.
in some of these poems. You have to work
Yeah.
to get it.
No, the Elizabethan sonnets don't have exactly the same structure, but there should be a turn in it someplace. In this case, you know, it's when he shifts away from when you give me permission. When my body is given permission by my soul because of your appeal, then this is the consequence. So you look for that. Any other favorite sonnets?
At the beginning, you said that there were some bad sonnets.
Yeah, there are
Could you
sonnets.
give us an example of a bad?
I did have some. Let's see if I could. I didn't jot down the numbers when I was going over them, though.
Well, the ones with all the wills in it.
Well, the will one I think is not.
That's not too good.
No, I didn't note them down. I'd have to look through all 150. I wish I had. I even thought about reading a couple of really classic bad
An
ones.
example of a bad
Yeah.
song.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't. I'd have to sit down and run through them. Does anybody have any other favorites? Okay, then let's look at some that turn to 65. 65. We didn't do this one, did we? Since brass, nor stone, nor earth, nor boundless sea, but sad mortality o'ersways their power. All things, even stone, pass on, don't they? Since brass, nor stone, nor earth, nor boundless sea, but sad mortality o'ersways their power, how with this rage shall beauty hold a plea, whose action is no stronger than flower? Oh, how shall summer's honey breath hold out against the wrathful siege of battering days, when rocks, impregnable, are not so stout, nor gates of steel so strong what time behaves? Oh, fearful meditation! Where, alack, shall time's best jewel from time's chest lie hid? Or what strong hand can hold his swift foot back? Or who his spoil of beauty can forbid? Oh, none, unless this miracle have might, that in black ink our love may still shine bright. We didn't do this one, did we? We did a couple of times. This is another one of my favorite sonnets, and this is one of the better ones of that series of about 8 sonnets, where he says, all things pass away except art, and my art will keep you alive. A couple of lines we might want to look at. What does this mean? Oh, fearful meditation! Where, alack, shall time's best jewel from time's chest lie hid? What is he referring to there? Time's best jewel from time's chest lie hid. What is the best jewel of time? Time is a Eastern caliph or something, right? And he's got all these beautiful things that time has created. They belong to him. And among those is the most beautiful creation of time, which happens to be you, the person I love. So how can we keep him away when Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves couldn't do it? How can we hide it when time will naturally possess, because of his endurance, all other beauties, including rocks and stone, when gates cannot shut out? He says the answer is, or what strong hand can hold his swift foot back? Or who his spoil of beauty can forbid? Is anything going to stop it? At my back I always hear time's winged chariot, remember? Hurrying near from Margot. Nothing. There's only one miracle that could make it last, and what is that miracle?
It's art, man.
Yeah. Black ink. It's a nice line. Okay, Sonnet 30.
when some things happen
Mhm.
with Mr. Cruz.
Yes, right. When to the sessions of sweet, silent thought I summon up remembrance of things past. You did Bruce this spring, didn't
I
you?
never knew what came.
Well, now,
Now we know.
à la recherche de
And
temps
Cruz read
perdu.
these.
I think so. It'd probably be in French, since the title is the French. He uses the French version of it. But yes, Remembrance of Things Past is from Shakespeare. Shakespeare, like universal geniuses, is claimed by European tongues. If you speak to people in Germany or France or Russia, and they will all claim that Shakespeare was a German or a Russian or a Frenchman, that he must be vastly better in German than in English. Did you know that? I mean, he has been translated so powerfully that they simply deny that his own words could be better than theirs. Especially the Germans and Russians have an enormous love and affection for him. The Germans have totally taken him. When to the sessions of sweet silent thought I summon up remembrance of things past, I sigh the lack of many a thing I sought, and with old woes new wail my dear time's waste. Then can I drown an eye unused to flow for precious friends hid in death's dateless night, and weep afresh love's long since cancelled woe, and moan the expense of many a vanished sight. Then can I grieve at grievances foregone, and heavily from woe to woe tell o'er the sad account of fore bemoaned moan, which I knew pay as if not paid before. But if the while I think on thee, dear friend, all losses are restored and sorrows end.
29.
Yes, it's very much like it. As you see, the editors put those together for that purpose. This is another stunning sonnet. It doesn't really need a lot of exposition, but still there are a few points I think to make about it. He is saying essentially there are times when I sit down and I pick the scabs, my emotional scabs. Is that right? That is, I think back of the people who died, who've gone into death's dateless night, and I start feeling sad. It hurts. It hurts. I was doing that. My grandmother died 13 years ago on 7th, and so I was thinking about Graham all day long, sort of sad. Well, it's been long enough. I should not. But still, we have moments in our life when we want to think about the people we've lost. And I think what we have to catch in the sonnet is that even though these are painful experiences, they're not experiences which are likely to move you into despair. There is, in fact, a certain pleasure in them, which is going to heighten the presence of the immediate and available love. So this is not a sonnet that says when I'm down in the absolute dumps. We're not at the bottom pit of fortune here, because the opening lines tell you it's a different kind of feeling. When to the sessions of sweet silent thought. What words there indicate the quality of this moment?
Sweet.
Yeah.
Bittersweet.
Okay.
Kind of.
Yeah. Right. He's by himself.
And sometimes
He's meditating,
it's
and
kind of a good feeling.
yeah. We don't want to forget the people we've had, right? Pardon?
It's enriching.
Yes. It reminds you of the people who you owe love to, and it's not going to be not painful,
No, it
but
would
it
be great.
still is. That's right. And so he says, I feel so, not bittersweet maybe, but certainly sugared maybe in some way, but not to make you feel lighthearted. I summon up remembrance of things past. I like the way he chooses his syntax, the words he puts together. What does summon up mean to you? Yeah, what's the emotional attitude of I summon up as though.
Deliberately.
Okay, well, somebody with a certain amount of power, people who have power summon up servants, don't they? Right? And so, alone in my den, I can feeling somewhat reflective, call up. So the way you might sit down and say, I want to think about Graham, right? I want to remind her, and call her up to your mind. And then when you finish with that, maybe call up something else, some other event. I sigh the lack of many a thing I sought. What is the consequence of that? You start feeling this is not losses, but failures to achieve. Right. You go back to your adolescence and you say, I could have been a lawyer. I could have been a doctor. I might have been a great artist, and here I am. I didn't get that. And so, but what kind of a word is sigh? Is it a devastating word?
It's like you're shrugging it off. It's not too serious.
Yeah, you're sober, but you're not. It doesn't sound suicidal to me, does it, to you? And with old woes, new wail, my dear time's waste. What does he do? Start over? Oh, if I had really listened to my father, I could have been a lawyer and rich by now instead of a high school teacher and poor. And so you chew the old fat a few more times, don't you? Then can I drown an eye unused to flow for precious friends hid in death's dateless night. Does he cry frequently? No. But can you get yourself in a mood to tear over those who've gone? And weep afresh love's long since cancelled woe. Think about somebody who you loved, who left you 25, 35 years ago. Bring a tear to you. Disgusting, isn't it, that people can carry that much power and moan the expense of many a vanished sight. Then can I grieve at grievances foregone. Gone meaning gone by. Grievances gone by. And heavily from woe to woe tell o'er the sad account of fore bemoaned woe. That's really neat. I can start over again like somebody who never stops telling you the tale. Right? I'll moan, which has already been bemoaned, but I'll moan it again because it feels so good. Whenever I read this line, I think it's probably the kind of complaint that he doesn't even change the words to, because he's got it down the way an actor has his lyrics down. Oh, I remember what that person did to me, and oh, what pain I went through, which I knew pay as if not paid before. The debt should be paid, but no, you start all over. Then you get the power of friendship. But if the while I think on thee, dear friend, all losses are restored. You catch, I think, with the sonnets how much Shakespeare likes to use financial imagery. You catch that? Yeah, he really had first. Maybe he was a banker.
Well, he was a good businessman.
He was that, yes.
You know how shocked students are when you say, why did Shakespeare write plays?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is to make money.
That's right. I was telling my students that Shakespeare, here he is the greatest writer in our language, wrote until he became a retirement age, and then he quit. And he bought a little house in Stratford, and went back home and never wrote another play as far as we know. And they always say, well, but he was Shakespeare. Right? He had to be writing for art. No, and he was writing, that was his job, it was his profession. They have an enormous resistance to that. But I think he was a sharp eye, had a sharp eye for the dollar, for the pound, shilling, pence.
Always was writing a play that was like to that particular.
That's right. And that may be why Troilus and Cressida wasn't put on stage. He probably knew that it wasn't going to make any money for him. There's no evidence of it being put on stage until 1898. So it was not a bestseller.
Well, he didn't write the plays. He didn't expect to be remembered for his plays.
Probably not, no. But
there's the poems.
no, the poems were not published by him either.
Venus and Adonis. Was that
Maybe Venus and Adonis, yes,
Yeah.
which he did write. I suspect he didn't anticipate that he was Shakespeare. He didn't know that. It's it is interesting that other people seem to know it, because there's ample evidence that Ben Jonson and the people in his circle were well aware that this man was somebody above and beyond them.
And the fact that they did the photos.
Yes, right. As soon as he died, they went over, right, put these things together.
Maybe they had a knack for the dollar too.
Well, they might have. Certainly the publishers did. Yeah. So
They did it out of love, though.
I think so.
His friend.
It seems to me that I've thought this for a long time, that you cannot read Shakespeare without seeing the enormous leap in quality from anything else going on at that time. I mean, I could, as in the case last fall, I could spend 3 or 4 hours reading Renaissance sonnets to you, and you come to Shakespeare and you're up 2 more levels, just like that. The very best of the others are mediocre in terms of what he can do with the form. And I don't think it's easy for a person to know how good he is. You can't see yourself. You can't, right? When he reads it, he reads the process that created it. He doesn't read it in the finished product. I think it must have been evident to his circle. It must have been evident to the players who read it. Right? It must have been evident to Ben Jonson and Beaumont and Fletcher. How would you like to have been Ben Jonson writing drama at the same time Shakespeare was writing? What would it be like to be Beaumont and Fletcher?
Suicidal.
I mean, there's just no, yeah. And if you look, when you read the sonnets or read the poems to Shakespeare that came out in the Corno or the Folio, you recognize that there's some truth to that. He's simply not to be compared with. You take Shakespeare out, and Jonson stands tall, right? But with him there, I can hardly endure teaching him. Right?
Though I love some of his poems. I mean, his plays just, for me, even Volpone, which is a wonderful piece, is just something else. Once in graduate school at Chicago, took 2 classes, one in pre-Elizabethan drama, and the other one in non-Shakespearean Elizabethan drama. And you want to talk about a trek across the Sahara Desert. It's reading this stuff without reading Shakespeare. It's terrible. But he all by himself, of course, is worth it. New wonders all the time. If it's not Coriolanus or Troilus, it's seeing a new production of Othello or Henry, something like that. So those are the sonnets that we've done. We're at 3 o'clock. See you perhaps next year. I have this up on my bulletin board at East Side. Somebody put it on my desk. Yeah, thank you. I'll stick it in my book here for permanence.
Have a good summer, Gary. You're going to be home
You too.
often.
Yeah, I think we're staying here this time. We don't have the money to head east this time unless Mama, Daddy want to see the grandchildren.